Target acquired. Follow my lead.
Engage.
Dawn, 17th August 1943. Wewak, New Guinea. Heat already hangs under a pale lid of cloud as ground crews of the 68th Ni-tai tug chocks from Ki-43 Oscars, beaded with dew and fuel. The air tastes of avgas and wet jungle. Sirens lift the birds from the palms, and engines cough alive. Pilots expect ponderous American bombers and climb for intercept over Boram and Dagwa airstrips. Then the sky hardens to glitter. High in the blue, silver needles appear. Twin tails braced by a central pod, props turning opposite to each other, a formation descending far faster than anything the men from Wewak have ever tried to match. Radios crackle half a syllable before the first tracers comb the climb. 2 Oscars ignite nose to tail. Another shucks its fabric aileron and tumbles. Survivors later recall attackers that fell like arrows and were gone before the slipstream. Settled, striking from above and vanishing in steep dives that an Oscar dare not follow. The thin morning light, the differences become brutal fact. The Ki-43, quick and light at roughly 310 mph, lacks armor and carries 2 machine guns. The intruders, Lockheed P-38 Lightnings, hammer with a centerline battery of 450 caliber guns and a 20mm cannon that do not waste aim in wing convergence. Turbo-supercharged Allisons keep their power where the air is cold. At over 400 mph and with long leg range on drop tanks, they choose the fight and keep it. A pilot who tries to spiral up finds the new enemy climbing away. One who tries to dive discovers the gulf widening until only smoke marks remain. By noon, wreckage will be counted on field and sea, and by week's end the 5th Air Force will visit again and again, stripping Wewak of its shield. To understand how a twin-tailed stranger sees that advantage, we step back to its radical birth in Burbank and the ideas that made speed, altitude and firepower a single weapon. In the summer of 1937, while Europe's air forces raced toward faster monoplanes, a challenge quietly emerged from the U.S. Army Air Corps, Circular Proposal X-608. It called for something America had never built, a single-seat fighter that could climb to 20,000 feet and hold 360 miles per hour. For Lockheed's young engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson and his mentor Hall Hibbard, this wasn't a specification sheet. It was a gauntlet thrown at the limits of aerodynamics. In a rented corner of Burbank's plant, they began sketching what would become one of the most audacious aircraft of the century. A fighter with 2 engines, 2 booms and 1 purpose, to outrun anything that flew. Where others imagined a faster monoplane, Johnson drew symmetry. Twin Allison V-1710 engines, each driving counter-rotating propellers to cancel torque, and a central nacelle, housing the pilot like a bullet between pistons. The design was strange, even unsettling. Critics inside the Air Corps called it too radical to fly. Johnson replied it must. By January 1939, the prototype XP-38 rolled onto the runway at March Field, gleaming in bare metal. Test pilot Ben Kelsey pushed the throttles forward, the twin Allisons howled, and the Lightning leapt skyward. It climbed faster than any U.S. fighter before it, a revelation in aluminum and math. Weeks later, on February 11th, Kelsey took it coast to coast in 7 hours and 2 minutes, averaging nearly 350 mph. The aircraft crashed short of the Mitchell Field runway due to icing, but the feat had already made headlines. America could now reach across its own continent in less than a working day. War was coming, and the Army suddenly understood what that meant. With 450 caliber Brownings and a 20mm Hispano cannon clustered in its nose, no convergence, no wasted fire, and a range beyond 1,000 miles. The Lightning became more than a prototype. It became the only American fighter capable of escorting bombers across the vast, blue voids of the Pacific, from Guadalcanal to Bougainville, where the battle-tested sky would soon belong to the twin tails born in Burbank. By 1941, when the P-38E Lightning officially entered U.S. Army Air Corps service, it represented a machine unlike any other in the sky, a tangle of innovation, ambition and raw power forged into aluminum. Each of its twin Allison V-1710F engines produced 1,425 horsepower, the two spinning in opposite directions to cancel torque and keep the aircraft level even under violent acceleration. For pilots accustomed to the quirks of single-engine fighters, it felt uncanny, smooth, stable, almost intelligent in the way it balanced itself through a climb. Beneath the broad wings sat turbo-superchargers that gulped thin air and fed it back under pressure, allowing the Lightning to leap above 35,000 feet, where most Japanese and German fighters gasped for oxygen. At those heights, the P-38 could still cruise above 400 mph, a number that, in 1941, bordered on the miraculous. The cockpit, perched between the twin booms, was both fortress and command post. Armor plate protected the pilot. Oxygen and electrical systems snaked through the nacelle. And in the nose, 5 weapons sat perfectly aligned. 450 caliber Browning machine guns flanking a single 20mm Hispano cannon. Unlike wing-mounted guns that required pilots to cross their fire, every Lightning round flew straight and true for hundreds of yards. Range, too, was revolutionary. Over 1,300 miles with drop tanks, allowing the aircraft to patrol vast ocean sectors or escort bombers beyond the reach of any rival fighter. The tricycle landing gear simplified takeoffs from muddy or improvised strips, while the twin tail provided both aerodynamic balance and life-saving redundancy. A Lightning could lose an engine and still fly home. It demanded skill, yes, and maintenance crews wrestled with the Allison's temper in tropical heat, but pilots swore by its instincts. "It flies like it's thinking," one said. As the first squadrons in the Pacific received their gleaming Lightnings, commanders realized the balance of the air war was shifting. For the first time, they possessed a fighter that could choose when and where to strike. April 1942. Across the Pacific, Allied squadrons were reeling. From the skies over Darwin to the steaming jungles of New Guinea, Japanese A6M-0s ruled the air. They were fast, light, and deadly in a turn, slicing through P-40s and Hudson bombers with ease. American and Australian pilots flew bravely, but knew the truth. They were outclimbed, outmaneuvered, and outnumbered. Then came the arrival of the 39th Fighter Squadron of the 35th Group, flying something the Japanese had never seen, the new Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Its twin tails glinted like silver scissors against the morning sun, its engines snarled in counter-rotation, and its range promised to reach battlefields no other Allied fighter could. On August 4, 1942, Lieutenant Rex Barber and his wingman lifted off from Port Moresby on patrol near Buna. Below them, the sea lay calm and deceptively still. Spotting 2 Kawanishi H-6K Mavis flying boats lumbering along the coast, Barber pushed the throttles forward, and the Lightnings surged ahead. The intercept took seconds. Cannon shells tore through the lead flying boat's fuselage. Flames rolled along its wings before it fell in pieces to the water. The second tried to climb and turn, but the twin-tailed fighter was already upon it. Both enemy aircraft vanished into smoke and spray. The P-38's first confirmed kills in the Pacific, but the real revelation came months later over Guadalcanal. Their Lightnings began flying long-range patrols far beyond the range of Zeros, ambushing incoming Japanese bombers before they reached the island. They could cruise at 300 miles per hour, dive like hawks, and climb faster than their opponents could follow. Pilots finally had control of the fight, the power to choose when to engage or disappear. Japanese crews soon whispered of a two-tailed devil that struck from the sun and melted back into the sky. At Rabaul, frantic radio calls described twin-engined fighters faster than anything, before static silenced them. The era of the hunted was ending. The hunter had arrived, and the Lightning was about to write its legend across the Pacific. By the opening months of 1943, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force was facing an enigma. From Wewak to Rabaul, patrols began reporting a strange new enemy fighter, twin tails, no engine on the nose, and speeds that defied belief. Intelligence officers at the 4th Air Army headquarters in Rabaul gathered field sketches that contradicted one another. Some pilots swore it was 2 aircraft flying impossibly close together. Others thought it was a twin fuselage bomber stripped for speed. Reconnaissance teams sent north to photograph wreckage near Salamaua and Leh returned with little to show. The tropical heat and magnesium alloys of the mysterious aircraft left only puddles of molten aluminum among palm stumps. The Japanese called it simply Ni-tai no Hikoki, the two-tailed airplane. Engineers at Nakajima and Mitsubishi pored over intercepted reports, trying to determine what power plant could push a fighter to 400 miles per hour. The consensus: it had to be experimental, perhaps even foreign-built. When a captured Allied pilot claimed it was half again faster than the Zero, disbelief gave way to unease. Bulletins circulated warning units to expect an American twin-engine interceptor, capable of climbing beyond 35,000 feet, a realm where most Japanese fighters lost power and lift. Tactical orders followed: avoid vertical climbs, engage head-on, and never try to chase it in a dive. None of it worked. Squadrons sent up to meet the Lightnings returned shredded or not at all. Veteran aces began disappearing. One struck down before he could even radio contact, another vanishing in a single burst of cannon fire. Fear became folklore. Pilots whispered about the Ni-tai no Akuma, the two-tailed devil that appeared out of the sun, fired once, and was gone. Desperation drove Imperial engineers to propose faster interceptors like the Ki-84 Hayate and the J-2M Raiden, but by the time they reached frontline units, the Lightning already owned the Pacific skies. April 18, 1943, Bougainville, Solomon Islands. The morning broke clear and windless over the jungle canopy, a green sea stretching to the horizon. At 7:45 a.m., Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's convoy lifted from Rabaul, 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers and 6 A6M-0 escorts. The flight plan was routine, an inspection tour of forward bases, a gesture meant to steady morale after months of mounting losses. What Yamamoto did not know was that his itinerary had already been read by his enemies. 2 days earlier, American codebreakers at Pearl Harbor had decrypted his detailed schedule. Departure time, route, and exact arrival down to the minute. From that intelligence, the U.S. Army Air Forces planned an audacious ambush they called Operation Vengeance. Only one aircraft. Type could make the mission's 1,000-mile round trip from Guadalcanal and still fight the Lockheed P-38G Lightning. 16 were chosen from the 339th Fighter Squadron of the 347th Group, each carrying drop tanks and stripped for range. At dawn they lifted off from Kukum Field, the twin Allisons roaring in unison. For nearly 3 hours, the formation skimmed the Pacific at wave-top height, 50 feet above the sea, to slip beneath Japanese radar. Navigator Major John Mitchell led the flight by stopwatch and compass, threading through clouds, holding a line of perfect precision toward Bougainville's coast. At 9:34 a.m., the Lightnings rose from the ocean like ghosts. Above them, right on schedule, droned 2 Betty bombers escorted by Zeros. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber split formation, climbing hard into the sun before diving down in attack. Cannon shells stitched through Yamamoto's bomber. Smoke blossomed from its right engine, then flame. The aircraft rolled, struck the trees, and vanished into the jungle below. Japan's naval architect of Pearl Harbor was dead within seconds. News of his death spread like shock through Tokyo. Newspapers mourned the loss of a living god, while the Imperial High Command demanded to know how enemy fighters had penetrated so deeply without warning. For Japanese pilots, the revelation was chilling. The Americans had struck 1,000 miles from base and had done so with absolute precision. From that morning on, even the vast Pacific could no longer promise safety. The Lightning's reach had become legend, and its shadow would hang over the Empire's skies until war's end. Behind every Lightning that roared into the Pacific sky stood an engine of production unlike anything the world had seen. From 1941 onward, Lockheed's Burbank plant in California became a city that never slept, its floodlights burning through the night as thousands of workers, many of them women new to factory floors, assembled the twin-boomed fighters by hand and by machine. Between 1941 and 1945, more than 10,000 P-38s rolled out of its hangars in a succession of refined variants. The E, F, G, J, and finally the L model, each faster, tougher, and deadlier than the last. On average, one Lightning left Burbank every hour. Engineers at General Electric perfected the aircraft's twin turbo-superchargers, allowing the Allisons to deliver full power at altitudes where enemy engines sputtered. Curtiss Electric propellers adjusted their pitch automatically, smoothing thrust between the counter-rotating engines. It was not just design, it was orchestration. The Lightning's creation depended on a continent-wide symphony of industry. Raw aluminum came from California and Washington, engine blocks from Ohio and Michigan, guns from Connecticut, electronics from Massachusetts. Rail cars and air freight corridors moved parts with mathematical precision, tracked by IBM punch card systems that became the silent nervous system of wartime logistics. By 1943, Lockheed's supply web stretched from West Coast smelters to Midwestern forges, each factory feeding another in perfect rhythm. Japan could not match it. Starved of oil, aluminum, and trained labor, Japanese plants struggled to keep even the aging A6M0 in service. By 1944, an American Lightning shot down over New Guinea could be replaced in days. A single Japanese Ki-84 Hayate might take months to complete. The imbalance grew catastrophic. Squadrons once outnumbered now flew in overwhelming waves, escorting B-24s and B-29s to Truk, the Marshalls, and Formosa. Where the rising sun had once commanded the sky, an unending tide of silver wings now filled it. The war of machines had turned, and the P-38 was its gleaming proof. Though conceived for the vast Pacific, the Lightning quickly earned its place in the skies of Europe. In the autumn of 1942, long before the P-51 Mustang appeared, the first fighter group took its P-38s north to Iceland to guard Allied convoys and intercept German reconnaissance aircraft prowling the North Atlantic. Its twin engines offered something no other American fighter could: security over cold, endless water. Pilots called it 2 chances to get home. When the group shifted south to North Africa during Operation Torch, the Lightning's range and endurance became vital. Over the deserts of Tunisia and the Mediterranean, it hunted the Luftwaffe's Ju-88 bombers and Mi-110 heavy fighters with ruthless efficiency. German crews who had first dismissed the bulky twin-boom machine as zu schwer zum Kämpfen, too heavy to fight, soon learned otherwise as the Lightning's nose cannon tore through their formations at distances beyond their return fire. In Italy and southern France, the P-38 became both sword and shield, escorting B-17s and B-24s over mountain passes and coastal routes, while recon versions mapped enemy defenses deep behind the front. Pilots like Richard Bong, Robin Olds, and Thomas Lynch praised its steady aim and unmatched stability as a firing platform. The twin tails stayed level even in high G turns, and its concentrated nose armament made deflection shooting brutally effective. Yet the European theater exposed the aircraft's weaknesses. Cold weather froze cockpit heaters. Compressibility dives near Mach 068 could lock controls until new dive recovery flaps were fitted, and carburetor icing demanded precise engine management at altitude. Still, no other Allied fighter of 1943 could match its reach. From North Africa to the Po Valley, the Lightning stretched Allied air power across continents. Lessons learned in Europe, better turbo regulation, refined cooling, dive brakes, fed back to Burbank and transformed later Pacific variants, the J and L, into models of near-mechanical perfection. What began as an experiment now proved itself a transoceanic weapon. Late 1943, the sky over Rabaul, New Britain, was a cauldron of smoke and sunlight. Once the proud stronghold of Japan's South Pacific Empire, the base bristled with anti-aircraft guns and hundreds of Zero fighters drawn from elite units. For months it had been called the Gibraltar of the Pacific, believed impregnable. But on October 23, 1943, that illusion shattered. 47 P-38 Lightnings of the 339th and 80th Fighter Squadrons climbed from New Guinea's Dobadura airstrips and leveled off at 20,000 feet. They were sleek, polished, and deadly, each carrying the strength of twin turbocharged Allisons tuned for altitude. As they crossed the Bismarck Sea, the sun at their backs, radar screens at Rabaul flickered too late. In perfect formation, the Lightnings rolled into their dives. The air screamed as they plummeted past 500 miles per hour, faster than any Japanese aircraft could follow, without structural failure. Below zero, pilots scrambled in alarm, throttling hard, but their climb rates betrayed them. By the time they reached interception altitude, the Americans were already among them, streaks of silver light carving through formation after formation. Cannon bursts flamed across the sky, fragments of aluminum and fabric spiraling into the sea. In just minutes, more than 40 enemy aircraft were destroyed, The P-38s lost only 3. Pilots later remembered the sight of tracers curling harmlessly behind their tails, too slow to catch them. One ground observer at Rabaul radioed a message that became legend. They dive faster than gravity. When the smoke cleared, Japanese morale cracked. Commanders realized that even Rabaul, the Empire's strongest bastion, was no longer defensible without control of the sky. Lightning squadrons returned day after day, striking shipping in Simpson Harbor, shredding transports and turning the bay into a field of flaming wrecks. Survivors would remember it as metal storms from the heavens. Rabaul's defeat marked more than the fall of a fortress. It proved that air superiority belonged not to numbers, but to altitude, energy, and invention. Behind every gleaming lightning that streaked across the Pacific was a man who had learned to wrestle genius and danger into harmony. The P-38 was not a forgiving aircraft. Its twin engines, complex turbo controls, and high-speed flight characteristics demanded precision. But in the hands of a master, it became a predator. Major Richard Irabong of the 49th Fighter Group proved it. Quiet, modest, and relentless in the air, he scored 40 confirmed victories, all in the P-38, more than any other American pilot of the war. Bong's attacks were surgical. He would climb high into the sun, roll inverted, and dive silently on enemy formations, firing a single burst from his nose-mounted guns before pulling away into the clouds. His wingmen said he never wasted ammunition or motion. His control of the lightning was total. Close behind him was Major Thomas Maguire, whose 38 kills made him nearly Bong's equal in both skill and daring. The two became legends of a new kind of air combat, what pilots called boom and zoom. Rather than turning in tight dogfights against the agile Japanese Zeros, Lightning pilots used altitude and energy as weapons. They struck from above, using gravity and speed to destroy opponents who tried to outturn them, then climbed back to strike again. It was a discipline of patience and calculation, taught through grueling training sessions that stressed teamwork, throttle control, and never surrendering altitude advantage. Japanese veterans like Saburo Sakai later admitted the truth. The Lightning could not be caught once it began its dive. For American pilots, those words were vindication. Yet mastery came at a cost. Missions often stretched for hours over open ocean, alone, with the monotone hum of engines, fuel fumes, and exhaustion as constant companions. It was endurance as much as aggression that defined the Lightning men. They gave the machine its character, transforming cold engineering into living dominance in the skies. For all its brilliance, the P-38 Lightning was never untouchable. In the harsh realities of the Pacific, its beauty met its limits. The twin Allison engines, so powerful in cool air, suffered under tropical heat and humidity. Turbo-superchargers corroded, intercooler ducts clogged with salt and dust. Mechanics stationed on rain-soaked jungle strips at Dobodura or Munda fought a daily war with mud, rust, and insects, stripping and cleaning parts by lantern light. The Lightning's size, its 52-foot wingspan and gleaming aluminum skin, made it easy to spot from miles away. To Japanese lookouts, the twin booms were as distinctive as a signature. Even its great strength, speed in a dive became a danger. At near Mach 0.68, airflow over the thick central wing choked the elevators, freezing the controls. Pilots who pushed too far discovered too late that their aircraft would not respond. Many were lost before engineers understood the cause: compressibility. At low altitudes, the P-38's grace turned cumbersome. Below 15,000 feet, nimble Japanese Zeros could outturn it with ease. Enemy pilots learned to bait the Lightning into slow-turning fights, where its twin engines became ballast rather than advantage. But the Americans adapted. Tactics shifted. Never dogfight, always dive. Engineers at Lockheed and field workshops introduced fixes: dive recovery flaps to restore elevator control, boosted ailerons for faster roll rates, and refined turbo intercoolers that kept power steady even in tropical heat. The Lightning evolved in real time, molded by combat experience and the hands of men who refused to let its promise falter. By 1944, the P-38L had become the definitive answer to its own flaws: sleeker, stronger, and capable of 420 mph while climbing past 40,000 feet. Its weaknesses had not destroyed it. They had forced perfection. The Lightning's resilience proved a deeper truth of war. that greatness is not born whole, but forged through failure and fire. By 1945, the Lightning had become the undisputed master of the Pacific skies. From the steaming jungles of Luzon to the storm-swept waters off Okinawa, its twin tails cast a shadow over every battlefield. Squadrons that had once fought for survival now flew with dominance. The P-38's reach stretched further than any fighter before it. Long-range reconnaissance variants, stripped of guns and fitted with cameras, crossed entire seas to photograph Tokyo Bay months before the invasion. Its bomb-carrying versions, fitted with rockets under the wings, swept low over airfields and shipping lanes, burning through Japan's already fragile logistics. In January 1945, Lightnings from the 475th Fighter Group escorted B-24 Liberators deep over Formosa. When Japanese interceptors rose to meet them, the result was one-sided devastation. Dozens of enemy fighters downed, not a single Lightning lost. Reports from Japan's Defense Command read like confessions of despair. No single-seat fighter can match their endurance or climb. The P-38's twin engines gave it the gift of survival. Hits that would doom a Zero or Oscar were shrugged off as one engine kept turning. When the mighty B-29s began operations from the Marianas, it was the Lightning that cleared their path, slashing through radar and flak belts, silencing interceptors before the bombers arrived. As the war neared its violent close, new terrors filled the sky, kamikaze squadrons diving toward Allied fleets. The Lightning became the hunter of suicide planes, catching them far from the ships they sought to destroy. To Japan's remaining pilots, the twin-tailed silhouette flashing in sunlight became a symbol of futility, a promise that resistance in the air was over. The empire that once ruled the Pacific now fought beneath an American sky. The age of the twin-tailed devil was ending. But its legend, born in innovation and tested in fire, had already become immortal. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the P-38 Lightning's story did not end. It evolved. The lessons locked within its aluminum frame became the blueprint for the jet age that followed. Engineers who had cut their teeth on its twin engines carried forward its innovations. The aerodynamics of counter-rotating propellers, the power of turbo-supercharging, and the precision of concentrated nose armament. These ideas directly shaped America's first operational jet fighter, the Lockheed F-80 Shooting Star. A design again guided by Clarence Kelly Johnson, the Lightning's original architect. What began as an audacious gamble in 1937 had become the foundation of modern flight. Reconnaissance variants of the Lightning, fitted with cameras in place of guns, had already pioneered high-altitude photography during the war, mapping entire island chains and enemy defenses. After victory, those same principles would evolve into the great reconnaissance programs of the Cold War, from the RB-45 to the U-2 and SR-71. Many surplus P-38s were kept alive as testbeds for radar calibration, rocket development, and missile control experiments, their sturdy twin-boom frames ideal for the new electronics age. Yet the Lightning's most enduring legacy was psychological. It proved that altitude, speed, and energy, not mere agility, defined air superiority. Japanese engineers who studied captured wrecks conceded that the design was 10 years ahead of its time. Its twin-tail silhouette inspired future innovators, from Sweden's Saab 21 to modern, unmanned aerial drones that still echo its shape. Though the jet age would soon eclipse it, the P-38 remained a symbol of fearless invention under wartime pressure. It bridged eras, propeller to jet, analog to electronic, uncertainty to mastery. Born from imagination and refined in combat, the twin-tailed devil became the ancestor of everything that followed. Over the steaming jungles of Papua and the broken coral airstrips of the Solomons, the remnants of P-38 Lightnings still rest where they fell, twin tails rising from the earth like the ribs of some ancient slumbering beast. Time has claimed their paint and polish, but not their presence. Beneath the vines and rain, aluminum bones still whisper of a war fought in the thin blue air above. For those who once faced them, the memories remain sharp as gunmetal. The glint of sunlight on silver wings, the scream of turbo-superchargers winding to full pitch, the dreadful certainty that nothing living could outrun the twin shadows descending from the sun. Across the ocean, In quiet hangars and airfields, a handful of restored Lightnings still take flight. Their engines rumble in harmony, that unmistakable counter-rotation that once marked doom to the enemy and deliverance to the Allied crews below. When they lift from the runway and climb into open sky, they carry with them more than nostalgia. They carry the echo of an age when courage and invention fused into something extraordinary. The P-38 began as an improbable idea and became one of the most feared and admired machines of the war. It was proof that imagination could be as decisive as firepower, that vision could bend the limits of physics and fate alike. To its enemies it was terror, to its pilots triumph, and to history it remains what it always was, thunder frozen in metal that never quite stopped rolling across the sky.